surviving the apocalypse one day at a time. KFUG, Fogville.
KFUG Community Radio 1019, the time. Paul Critz with you, and community service. It is, let's see, what's today? Wednesday, the 6th day of October 2021. I've got Mike Thornton, Persephone Rose in the studio, and we are joined also live, Sheriff Randall Waltz of Delnor County. How are you doing this morning?
Good morning. It's a great day.
It is a great day. It looks very nice out there. That's cool. How are things in law enforcement? Anything we need to know?
I was gonna say I'm not the only person who responds to how you doing with the time it is.
The time, yeah, it's good.
What time is it?
So, how long have you been sheriff? It was 2 weeks ago or so. Just over 2 weeks ago.
It was a week ago Tuesday.
Was it just a week ago? Wow.
So over 1 week, I was appointed as the sheriff here in Delnor County. I was acting sheriff for a few weeks before that.
So you're still in the honeymoon period. Everything's so smooth. No questions.
I've been putting in some long days. Let's put it that way.
So, we were talking beforehand. I was looking online just to do some research before talking to you. I can find nothing about you. I didn't spend a whole bunch of time Googling, but I could find just a cursory just across the top. So tell us about yourself. How did you end up sheriff of Delnor County?
Well, I have about 29 years in law enforcement. Starting in the Fresno area as a reserve officer for Fresno Police Department for a few years, and I volunteered with search and rescue with the Sheriff's Department in Fresno. I was working in public works, and then I made this strange decision to go to the police academy, and I turned 35 years old while I was in the academy.
Oh, wow.
And I got a job with Tulare County Sheriff. They were the first one to offer me a job.
We'll have to talk, and this may be another conversation we have. I was born in Fresno and grew up in Tulare, so that's crazy.
You guys are
We probably know people in common. So I worked there and for about 11 years, then I moved and went to the DA's office in Fresno and did that for about 12 years. And then things happened in my life, and I made a decision to retire. So, as luck would have it, I had met the sheriff. I had met Sheriff Apperson a couple years prior, and we were working together to bring some law enforcement training into the region. And I was working with the academy in Fresno, and so we had been working together for a while, trying to determine what kind of training and how to get it here, and try to ameliorate some of the hardship of sending people out for mandatory training, and bring the training to the region instead. So we actually were working on that, and in the midst of all this, I retired, and my wife and I found a retirement home I'm sorry, not a retirement home.
Yeah, right. There's a difference.
At least not yet, right?
Not yet. I have
Found this lovely place full of old
a vacation home.
companions.
Put it that way. Okay. A vacation home in the region.
Up here?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And so what I say is that I accidentally got a job.
Yeah, because you really did.
The Sheriff Apperson created the Undersheriff position, and after some talk with my wife, we decided maybe that was something that I was meant to do.
Wow.
So I talked to him, and we got some more serious talks, and I applied and threw my hat into the ring, and lo and behold, I became the Undersheriff. Well, we started working on some projects together as far as recruitment and retention, bringing our level of professionalism up by improving our training. And that's one of my areas that I've worked in a lot, is law enforcement training.
And it makes sense that you encountered Eric in that way too, because Sheriff Apperson is very big in the training and sort of backfilling all of the skills necessary. That's kind of his deal.
Yeah, and he saw that in me, and my connection to the academy, and my connection with California Post, Peace Officer Standards and Training. So we started working on some programs. We did bring some classes here and started working together. So then fast forward to more recent times, and he announced his intentions to move on to greener pastures and do some things for himself and for his family. And he had a serious talk with me before he made that announcement. So I knew about a week before everybody else did.
Mm-hmm.
And he threw that one on my lap and said, would you be willing to take the rest of the term? And so I said, let me get back to you.
Yeah, I got some people to talk to.
I thought I was retired.
Yeah.
I should probably talk to my wife.
So I'm confused. Were you brought in as undersheriff, like without that express intention of being appointed sheriff? Were you brought in for a different reason?
I was brought in here to, and what I had told him was that I was willing to give him 3 to 5 years and work on bringing the level of training up and improve the level of professionalism of our staff.
Okay.
And work on some hiring and recruitment practices and try to move that in a positive direction.
But you didn't know that Sheriff Apperson was planning on leaving, and
No, and
that was news to you.
as far as I know, he didn't have any idea of that.
Okay.
Because when I came in here, his express goals were to get reelected enough times to be able to retire from this job.
Oh, wow.
And you know, my plans have changed so many times in my life. You know, there's a saying that says, if you want to make God laugh, you make a plan. Well, that's how my life has been.
Right.
And I've had so many obstacles and diversions that have sent me off to what it ends up being something that was better. So,
Wow.
you know, you got to think that was something that was meant to be in my mind.
So are you just open to that sort of possibility in your life then?
It's not easy.
Really?
You know, I keep reminding myself that this keeps happening. When I look back, you know, 2020 hindsight, you can look back and see how this frustration in my life diverted me to something that ended up being better. And so I keep trying to remind myself whenever I've encountered these frustrations. And it's really hard at the moment because we get caught up in our own plan and our own ideas.
Yeah, exactly.
So I'm curious. You said you moved from law enforcement, general term, into the DA's office.
As an investigator,
As an investigator,
as a peace officer.
Because I was wondering if you were a lawyer too.
Oh no, I'm a far stretch from being a
So
lawyer.
you were an investigator for the district attorney.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, a criminal investigator.
Okay, so it's been just as a quick aside, and I want to set the stage because I'd like to delve into maybe your insights comparing the two communities. And it's been 30 years since I really spent any time in the San Joaquin Valley, and I know that it has changed incredibly in those 3 decades. What did you experience, go through there in Fresno and Tulare that is translatable to up here, if anything? Because to me, just, you know, on the surface of it, they just seem like 2 different planets.
They are definitely 2 different planets in some respects. The level and type of crimes is completely different. Well, the weather is different.
Yeah, that's true.
But I think the basic foundation of law enforcement and law enforcement training is very similar.
What is
And,
that foundation?
establishing a solid foundation of training. I mean, I don't know. I'm going to say the word training probably 100 times today.
Yeah, but
because
it's got to mean some specific things to you if you work with it so thoroughly.
So there are some areas of training that, well, let's back up a little bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about a large police department or a large sheriff's department. There are several layers in those agencies, and so there are specialties within those agencies. You have a property crimes investigations. You have violent crime investigations. You have a sexual assault unit, and all these different levels of investigations. Well, pretty much our deputies that are out on the street here, we don't have those layers.
Right.
They're doing it all. We have one person, one deputy that's assigned specifically to investigations. And that deputy sometimes gets pulled off of investigations and has to cover a need in our patrol operations or our dispatch sometimes, or some other need that we have. So most of our deputies are down where the rubber meets the road, and they're having to do some of the more complex investigations that other agencies would hand off. There are police officers on the street that aren't really trained even how to lift a latent fingerprint.
Sure.
So our deputies are taught to do all that because there isn't anybody else that's going to come in. You can't call in the crime scene investigators to investigate the crime. We have to do it all the way from the bottom to the top. So one of my needs here is to get all of our deputies put through some of the training courses that are usually reserved for detectives that are doing specialized jobs. Our people are going to be specialized in a lot of specialties is what my goal is. I want to be able to send them. And so some of it's money, some of it's staffing. There's some obstacles to that, but I'm going to be focused on getting through those obstacles and getting these people the specialized training that they need to do their job at a higher level.
And we're speaking with Delnor's newly appointed County Sheriff, Randall Waltz. This is KFUG Crescent City Community Service.
Go ahead, give the time, wise guy.
I don't have a watch, you know.
10:31 is the time.
So Sheriff Waltz, let me ask you. I wouldn't have gone to the issue of training as quickly as I'm going to go now, because you're talking about it so much, I will. So I'm really interested, particularly in use of force training and de-escalation, and the relative percentages that officers, particularly our Delnor County Sheriff officers, get in use of firearms versus de-escalation. Can you talk about that?
I can speak sort of generally about that. I think, well, for one thing, de-escalation is a mandatory component of our use of force training. And it always has been. It's been given a name now. Before, they used to call it the continuum of force. When I went to the academy, they talked about the first level of force is command presence, which is, your body being there, your presence there with your badge, somebody knowing that, law enforcement is here. The second level would be verbal, using your verbal skills. And they used to have what they called verbal judo, which was using your communication to de-escalate. They didn't call it that, though. That's kind of a buzzword now.
They called it verbal judo, which is cooler.
Yeah, I know, that's neat.
Yeah, well, and judo is it's a martial art that uses somebody else's force to not to resist against the force, but to use their force to get compliance. So it's always been there, but now there's more of a focus on it, and I think in some segments of the law enforcement, they might have gotten away from it, and that's where the news articles come from. In my experience, it's always been a component of use of force. As far as our training locally, we actually have, in the last 6 or 8 months, we've developed a use of force training team in our staff. We've gotten a simulator. It's a VR simulator that uses virtual reality, and there are some canned scenes that come with it, and we can create our own. Everything from an active shooter in a hospital to an angry neighbor that ends up brandishing a knife or a baseball bat, or you can make these scenes any way that you want, and then the instructor can manipulate the scene and manipulate the conversation so that it's not a canned response that's coming out. The deputy needs to come up with a way to start talking it down and to try to make a good resolution out of it. Sometimes it requires a use of deadly force. Sometimes there might be compliance or different levels all the way in between that. But we were given this simulator by California Post, and we haven't gotten it up and running quite yet. We've done some experimentation with it. They've done some updates with the software to make it more usable, and our staff has to get another level of training in order to be able to use it. But we want to roll that out regionally and make it available to all the agencies around here.
Oh, wow.
Are you familiar with Campaign Zero?
It's not ringing a bell.
It's a thing that they do about working to reduce police violence in general. And the reason I'm bringing it up is because I remember being at a presentation about that, and they were saying that kind of nationwide on average, that officers are generally trained 9-to-1 in use of weapons, particularly firearms, as compared to de-escalation. Is that true in California?
I don't believe so. Not in my experience. They don't use the terminology anymore, but from when I went to the academy, there was the continuum of force, and it was always to use the least amount of force necessary to affect the arrest or the control of the situation. So no, I don't think that was anything that I've been exposed to.
Okay, great, thank you.
I turn my own mic off. There we go. I know
Professional.
It's exactly. This isn't my first day. I know we're not going to talk about anything specific with the shooting that was out on Parkway a month or so ago, because there's an ongoing investigation and everybody in the community has seen the video that's on YouTube. All of that. That had to be a hell of a thing to walk into. Here, I'm going to take over in a couple of weeks as sheriff. I don't know. Can you say anything about just even that's not so much the case, but even just the scene behind, in the sheriff's department and just dealing with that, because that's not something that we deal with all the time here in Delnor.
Well, I can speak generally. Our world has really changed in the way that law enforcement is responding to the public in these type of incidents. With the advent of social media, there is a lot of information that floods out immediately. There's a lot of misinformation that floods out immediately. And I will say that in my tenure in law enforcement, it used to be that the response for quite a while after an event like that would be that we're not releasing any information at this time. It's an ongoing investigation. Well, that day is long past, because there was this incident back in the Midwest in a town called Ferguson, where there was a big information void for a long time because law enforcement refused to release information. Well, when there's an information void, somebody's going to fill the void. And everybody has heard the term hands up, don't shoot. And that never happened. Somebody that said they were a witness reported that, and the media jumped on that, and it went like wildfire. There were a lot of events that happened at Ferguson that were never released early on, and maybe should have been, to quell some of the uprising about it. In our event that happened, our officer-involved shooting that happened out here on Parkway, there was a lot of misinformation that was spreading out there, including from some people that were present or nearby. And whatever the agenda was, it was completely false. I made the decision that we needed to release the body-worn camera videos because that would answer a lot of people's questions. And I worked, CHP is the lead investigating agency on this case. And so I was working with them. They weren't wanting to release it quite yet because they still had some interviews to do. And so my goal was to release it as soon as I could without, affecting the investigation in a negative way. So that's what I did. I released the video, and all of a sudden the social media buzz just went down to almost zero.
Yeah.
So it answered a lot of the questions. It put some of the people who were spreading mistruths kind of in their place. There were a lot of posts on Facebook and other social media that were deleted immediately after that. That was kind of an interesting phenomenon. But so what we need to do, if we don't control the story, somebody else will. So we need to get out in front. And that's kind of the way law enforcement has changed. We need to get out and be transparent and let people know what's going on, whether it benefits us or not. If we screwed up, we need to get out in front of it and say we screwed up.
Because you're not going to hide it in this day and age. You know, it's going to show up somewhere, right? Yeah, regardless.
So if there's video, we need to show video. If there's information, we need to show information. There's obviously going to be some sort of time lapse before we can release certain things because of the investigation. We don't want to feed people with information that they might throw into their witness account.
Yeah.
So, and once again, not speaking about any particular officer or any particular incident, can you speak to what it's like for a police officer to be involved in a traumatic incident like that? Does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yes. I will say that it's not, most people on this earth, it's not their desire to take a life or severely injure another person. There are those exceptions, and there are names that I learned in my psychology class that are appropriate for them. But most of our people, and I think probably all of my staff, do not wish that to happen ever in their career. And there are many people that go through this career and never have to have that happen. Just as in our simulator, if you do not respond properly and the figure in the simulator kills the officer, that's a fail. In real life, that's a fail. And so that's where the training comes in. We have to do repeated training. We have to use our simulators. We have to have training out on the range for, and when I talk about on the range, I'm not only talking with our firearms. We do training with impact weapons. We do training with our taser, electronic devices. We use all levels of force for different situations, and we do constant training on that. We have incorporated, when we do our range training, there's always another component. It might be defensive tactics. It might, the weaponless defense. It might be less lethal weapons that are incorporated. We are incorporating another level of force into every range training that we do. So I think that's a very positive step. And our range trainings are now going a full 8 hours long, because it's not just shooting on the range. We're incorporating something else into it. So I think that we're focusing a lot more also on the emotional effect.
Well, and that's what
of
I
an
wanted
incident.
to get to, the psychological and emotional trauma that can come with that.
Yeah, and I can speak to that. I will say that there are more law enforcement officers that die from suicide, almost 2 times as many as that die from violent crimes. So that's a shocking figure to me. When I first heard that figure, and you can look back for years, and it's pretty consistent. Sometimes it's more than twice as many that we lose to suicide. And there is a segment of life that we experience in law enforcement that the average person doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
We see some pretty horrendous scenes. We experience the ugly side of the world. We are sheriff coroners, so we do coroner cases, which includes traffic accidents. It includes people dying of diseases or old age, heart failure, violent crimes. And these are things that most people in the world do not experience up close and personal. And we get in there and we put our hands on them. And not to be too graphic, but early on in my career, I was picking up parts on a freeway that most people would never be doing.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And it's kind of but you turn off your emotions and you do your job. Well, all this kind of compiles on a person,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a cumulative effect. And I think law enforcement has now recognized that that's a thing, and that we need to address that thing, and we need to take away the stigma of asking for help, and for asking for some kind of counseling or some other sort of treatment to deal with some of these things that have compiled in our lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, I think, the fire service has their own, military has their own, and there was always a stigma attached to asking for help.
Right.
So we're trying to peel away that stigma and make people realize that this is a normal response to an abnormal event.
Right. The takeaway for me was seeing the body cam footage initially. That's the first thing I noticed. I mean, it's a horrible tragedy, everything, all of the, even unanswered questions, everything. But first thing I noticed was the look on the faces of some of the law enforcement people there on the camera, just passing in front of, whoever was walking around with that body cam on. And I'm just, the tragedy of it really hit me there too, because I could see it in both, and everybody involved, but to see that in law enforcement faces too, that they had, wow, what just happened? And that kind of like that punched in the face sort of look, that was very striking to me. And I didn't expect to see that. And that's maybe just, being conditioned from news for the last couple of years or the last couple of centuries or however you want to phrase it. But looking at all of it, I wasn't expecting that. And I was surprised to see, oh my God, I'm empathetic for this law enforcement person who's walking around with this 1,000-yard stare after this human being's been shot. And I'm like, oh my God, it changed my understanding of maybe all of those types of scenes, but certainly that specific scene. That was wrenching to see.
Yeah, and it's something, we all watch TV shows, and they deal with things, and it's TV, it's movies. We employ real human beings, and they come from all walks of life, and they have real human responses to real life things, and it's something that some people try to tuck away, and some people are successful at tucking it away for a long time, and then maybe there's something that causes it to manifest. But it's something that and I'm talking not just our agency or our region or statewide, but I think profession-wide, we're looking more at officer wellness. And it's something that we need to address, and we need to sometimes peel that scab back and get in there and give people what they need to get fixed.
Right. 10:49 the time. You're tuned to KFUG Community Radio, and Mike, Persephone, and myself, we're talking with Delnor County Sheriff Randy Waltz. It's our first conversation. We're getting to know the guy.
First talk. Shall we get into listener questions?
Yes, that was exactly where I wanted to go with this. So we asked, or actually you introduced this segment. I'll shut up.
You do that, Paul. We took a few questions from our listeners. I got 5 here. 5 specially chosen. It was all the ones we got. Thanks for sending in. They're all rational. That's nice.
Good.
It's a good start.
Well, that's comforting.
And almost no math, so don't worry about that.
No math, and I
I'm
got
okay with math.
You're okay with
a
math.
lot of these I actually don't know the answer to, so I'll be asking these not knowing. Our first comes from everyone knows, everybody loves Denise Doyle Schnacker.
Yes, indeed.
Will he be continuing the Sheriff's Advisory Group? And what are his thoughts on neighborhood watch groups? I guess that's 2, so you can bat one at a time.
All right. Yes. We will be continuing the Sheriff's Advisory Group. I have been
Lives on.
integrated into that over the past year and a half or so that I've been hanging around here. It's been kind of put on pause a little bit lately. We've had it's kind of come and gone because we had the COVID issues about meeting in person, and then we kicked it back into gear again, and then we got another surge, and then yes, I'm definitely going to continue that, and I think we can never forget that we serve the community, and we need to hear what the community has to say. So that's a big thing to me. We need to open the door to people's input. We also need to be able to recognize what problems are going on in your neighborhood. You know, maybe we're not aware of something or aware of what people's perception of the problems are, and maybe we can work on those and find solutions together. As far as neighborhood watch, I think that's a fantastic thing. Whether it's law enforcement sponsored or something that people just do on their own. I think that our societies we build fences and we put blinds on our windows and we have our automatic garage door openers, and nobody hangs out in their front yard and meets their neighbors these days. And it's kind of sad. I think people need to have neighborhood gatherings at the very least, and knock on the doors and welcome the new neighbor that just moved in, and try to get to know each other. The more that you know each other, the more you can trust each other and keep an eye out for each other. So, and then you also might know a little bit more about their family and know who's supposed to be coming and going, or they might trust you enough to tell you, hey, we're going to be out of town for a couple weeks. Nobody has permission to be at my house. And so that there are people that haven't known that about their next door neighbor, and they come home and somebody brought a moving van in and moved all their stuff out. And you know, so those kind of things are important. People need to know and trust each other in their neighborhood.
So I'm curious, you brought up COVID, and I'm wondering how COVID and this particular surge has affected your officers and other county, I'm thinking particularly of people working in the jail. How has COVID affected their ability for both street officers and employees in the jail being able to do their jobs?
Well, it's changed some things, and some things haven't changed. I think we've, not just our deputies, but I think our society has become more aware about hygiene and sanitization and washing your hands. I have to say, years ago when I worked in a jail, I became very aware of washing my hands, because just touching the doors and touching things, I would start, like, I felt creepy crawlies on my hands, and I was washing my hands probably 10 to 15 times in a 12-hour shift, just because all of a sudden I felt like I needed to wash my hands. So I I think that our people have become more aware of hygiene. Several of our people have tested positive and gotten ill with COVID, and we've kind of gotten past that wave, and it affected our staffing for a while, and people were nervous and not sure what was going to happen. I think we've gotten past that. We're still wearing personal protective equipment. We have rules about social distancing in the office, wearing personal protective equipment in the jail. So yeah, it's changed some things, but we still are operating at full bore.
I feel like that also kind of roundabout answers the sheriff's advisory group has only been not active, I assume, because of COVID, because of this surge.
That has been part of it. I think right now that there was a meeting that was scheduled right during the middle of this transition, and I had a few hundred other things going on. We had to
Fun time to schedule it.
we had to press pause on it. It comes up as a regular scheduled appointment on my calendar, so I think we've had to cancel a couple along the way in the past few months, but I'm definitely planning to get it rolling back up and get the input coming back again. It's been a really productive segment of our community involvement.
Awesome. Our next question comes from Mr. Wake Bake Participate himself. I don't know this. I tried to search this one. This is more technical, I guess. What is the Delnor County Sheriff's Posse Association? When I did search that, it only came up with like a page that says it exists and then nothing else.
It's a work in progress.
Gotcha.
It's a
Breaking news here.
It's a nonprofit that is being formed by some of our citizens that wanted to help with the sheriff's department, and they have plans to do some fundraising that's going to help different areas of our department, like the K-9 program that we're starting to develop, and we don't know exactly where all it's going to go. It's going to be an inlet for people to be able to donate for something specific if they want. We've had an inquiry already. Somebody wanted to buy ballistic vests for our K-9, and it's not something cheap, and it's not something that's in our budget. So things like that.
No, it's funny you say that. We have a question from Mike Thornton. Is Lieutenant Kai actually a lieutenant?
I was because I really
Now you're
wanna,
getting confused.
I want to know
It's police, right?
how
The
does
Kai's
a K-9 become a lieutenant? That's what I really want to know.
I am not going to speak for Lieutenant Kai, who's a proud member of the Crescent City Police Department.
Right.
Hypothetically.
Captain Bruno.
Okay. How does a K-9 become a captain?
Well, it's kind of a.
Can we just let the name Captain Bruno sit in for that? It's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a tradition in law enforcement K-9 circles that the K-9 outranks the handler.
Oh, that's great.
So
I didn't know that.
if the handler is a deputy, then the K-9 would typically be a sergeant. Or if the handler is a police officer, then it would be a sergeant. If the handler is a sergeant, that's where lieutenant
There you go.
would come in.
Okay.
So that would be the next typical rank. Now,
So dogs have like a +1 to their position in the K-9. Interesting.
now, in the case of Captain Bruno, he was named for our local Captain Bruno De-Escalation, and so that he retained the rank.
Oh, the captain came with
the rank.
name. Gotcha.
Yes,
Okay.
came with the rank, and there was a decision made to maintain that rank. So that's where that comes from.
Mike asked because he's got a dog that needs a rank.
I've got an old German Shepherd, you know what I mean, who is Corporal Shadow. So,
well, you can give him any rank you want.
That's great.
Any rank he deserves.
That's right.
And this is the fun one that you were probably expecting, just on the constituents and the point. This is actually from reporter E's father. Thanks, Nick. And it's actually, this one's reasonably, he very much cushioned it, and I reworded it just because there was so much extra text. But my concern is the same as Valerie Starkey's when the process usually takes into consideration 27,000 or so votes to elect a sheriff. It seemed that this time the Board of Supervisors were in a rush to get this done. He would love to hear the opinion of our new sheriff and what you would have to say on the input. From earlier, it seems like this was as much of a surprise on you as anyone else, but if there's anything else you would like to say on the process that happened. As opposed to being appointed by 5 individuals for an office that's usually, an elected office here in Delnor County.
Yeah, I think our county officials reviewed all the possible avenues to go with that. Just from my knowledge, they made a decision based on, they looked at other agencies' experiences. I know that Calaveras County was one that they looked at where the sheriff passed away during his term. They were one that opened it up for interviews, and there were several people within the agency that applied for it and interviewed, and I talked to their undersheriff a while back, and he said it caused a lot of division in their agency because there was a lot of shuffling around and elbow throwing,
jockeying
and different people thought they deserved it, and it hurt some feelings. I don't know if that came into play. I'm not going to speak for them, but I know that they looked at all the possible avenues. They looked at what the law says, and the law specifically says that they can hold a special election, they can select whoever they choose and appoint into the position for the remainder of the term. I think because it's only 15 months till the end of the term that they made the decision to make an appointment. And I think they wanted to streamline the process and keep continuity of control and command, and they made the decision based on that.
It also seems to throw some light, to shed some light on Supervisor Chris Howard's comments about you not being any part of any faction inside. And we read this inside the sheriff's office. We read that and we're going, what's this mean? What factions are going on? What kind of Game of Thrones thing is happening? And no, that makes perfect sense though. If you elevate somebody from within, maybe that's what Chris was talking about.
Well, that does actually make sense, because when we were first hearing that, it's like, well, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
But it sounds like that it was a way to perhaps not pit various people and or groups within the department against each other by bringing in someone a relative outsider. Is that that's what we're really talking about?
Yeah,
right?
I think that's part of it too. And I did understand what he was saying. It was kind of a interesting way to put it, and I hadn't really considered that at the moment. But I think that's also part of why Sheriff Apperson put me in the position of undersheriff. He wanted a fresh look from outside,
and created the whole position, right? As undersheriff, right? It didn't exist before.
He wanted to change the paradigm a little bit and bring in a fresh perspective from outside and bring in some fresh ideas, and that's what we're doing. But my goal is to develop a line of succession and to prepare people to move into the positions when when I'm gone and when other people retire out. I think it's really important to prepare people to be able to fill those positions from inside. I think it's good for morale, and it's good for the continuity of the command structure of the agency.
That's interesting. So your philosophy and your sort of approach, because you're kind of like, in a lot of ways, like a lowercase s structuralist, in that it seems like you are interested in building the structures that will be there when all the individuals are gone. This entity will still exist and will still be able to function because you've built the bones right, and you set up this structure to outlive you.
Absolutely. I think it would be foolish not to look into the future and set some plans. I came here from the outside. I had a lot on my plate when I got here, a lot of unknowns. I didn't know the people. I didn't have come with some predetermined opinions about the staff. I was able to learn. I didn't want anybody coming and telling me, watch out for this guy, or I kind of shut those conversations down.
Watch out for Stinky Hand Steve.
Yeah, that's right.
Bad handshakes. I'm curious, do you currently, or will you at some point have your own undersheriff?
That's a possibility. It's yet to be determined. I haven't even started those conversations yet.
You got to find someone worthy.
Well, and it's interesting that you talk about setting up a succession plan, and it says a lot of different things, or potentially different things, but because I can just see the potential frustration and loss of good people if it's kind of determined, well, there's a dead end, there's a ceiling within this agency that no one is ever going to be able to get above.
Right. Right. No, I think that there needs to be a level of knowledge and preparedness. I need to be really good at delegating some of my duties to get people exposed to them, for their knowledge, and for me to also assess them. How well do they handle this level of responsibility? So those are all things that come into play. I think that a major responsibility of any supervisor or administrator is to develop the people that are in their organization, and whether it's a sergeant developing their deputies, or me working on developing the whole rest of the structure of the group.
So that leads me to ask you, are you good at delegating, or is that something you have to really work on?
Oh, that's something I've struggled with my whole career. I've gotten better with it, that's for sure, because I've tied myself down in my past by keeping tasks that I should hand out to other people. But sometimes the mindset is, I know I can do it better and faster than anybody else.
It'll be done best if I do it. And then you end
if
up.
I teach somebody else to do it, it'll take a lot of time and they'll make mistakes. Well, we all learn from making mistakes, and it helps them learn, helps free me up to do other tasks. So it's a win-win.
It is 7 minutes past 11. You're tuned to KFUG LP Crescent City 101.1 FM, online, kfugradio.org. Mike, Persephone, and myself, Paul, we're talking with Sheriff Randy Waltz from Delnor County Sheriff Office about his new job. So what got me is it seems like kind of ironic in that here's somebody interested in setting up a system and building this kind of structure that will sustain itself, but the appeal and the reason that you were in this job, even to begin with, is the fact that you came from without that structure, whatever the structure was before, that you kind of were just sort of dropped in, fait accompli, hand of God, separate from the structure, and here you are on top of it, and now you have to like fashion it around you. It seems like just the irony of being outside the system and then tasked with redefining that system when you come in and set up shop.
Yeah, and I will say that when I first met Sheriff Apperson, we had I think we clicked because we we had like mind in a lot of ways. And we started working together on solving one immediate problem. Well, as I got to know him more, we had a lot of common goals. We didn't agree on everything. We bumped heads here and then, but that's part of a healthy organization, encouraging dissent. And he encouraged me to disagree with him.
We just got a live question from a listener.
Hey.
Will you run for sheriff in the next election?
Oh, we were talking, yeah.
Well, that's I've been asked that a few times already. Let me just say that I'm going to cross one bridge at a time. I've had some discussion about this. Right now, my answer is that I will never say never at this point. It wasn't in my plan.
Yeah, but
let's just see how things go.
You know the use of plans, though, right?
Oh boy, do I!
I know, because we were talking about. I forget if this was on the mic or off mic when we were discussing. But if that is something you decide to do, you've got to turn around and do it this coming spring. You've got to start filing paper and thinking about campaign and stuff.
Yeah, I understand. Filing deadline would be in March sometime. So
oh my gosh,
that would have to get spooled up pretty quickly.
Yeah. It might behoove you to just have a better feel for what the job would be like for another 4 years like that on top of it.
Yeah, let's get through Thanksgiving.
We've not even gone through all our questions.
I know. Let's hit another one. That's great.
We have an anonymous one.
Uh-oh.
I would like to know how the new sheriff plans to serve and protect the unhoused members of our community. And they added a little smiley face at the end.
That, of course, a hot button issue as it is everywhere in California, but
especially Delnor, I feel it's on the burner.
Yeah,
and there's no easy answer for that in any jurisdiction. I mean, it's a problem that is being dealt with from Laguna Beach to up here in Brookings to Portland, Seattle. It's everywhere, even in the Midwest. So I think the best solutions are partnerships. You have to work with social services, mental health. It's not something that law enforcement can solve, because there are so many facets that put a person in a place where they are living out on the streets, where they're living in a tent out on the lawn on a park, or parked in a car on the side of the road. There are a lot of facets that put somebody in that position. Some people were once middle class, productive persons in a society, and something happened and put them in that position. Other people have lived kind of that life since their teens. There are mental health issues. There are substance abuse issues. It's not a law enforcement solution for sure. So the partnerships that seem to be working in some places include law enforcement, social services, mental health services, some private organizations that work on locating housing. Not everybody wants to live in a brick and mortar, sticks and bricks, whatever home. Not everybody wants that life. I think that's one of the big things that some people don't recognize is you can't help somebody that doesn't want to be helped. I know I see it all the time. People putting money out the window of their car and they think that's helping people. I will say right here and now, that doesn't help anybody. That does not help them, except it helps them support their substance abuse problem or their ability to live the way that they're living. It doesn't help move them into a better place.
This was an issue here locally over the last few years with one of our supervisors. Should that one act handing money out of your car window to somebody, over by Walmart or whatever. Should that be illegal?
No.
Okay.
No, some jurisdictions have made that act illegal in and of itself. Some other ones have looked at the more of a roundabout way and saying you can't block traffic.
Yeah, to like
by doing that.
criminalize a different aspect of the interaction, right?
Or say that somebody can't stand on a median island soliciting unless they have a permit. And none of these things really work very well. And I will say that there's certainly not any room in our agency that gives us extra time to be able to enforce something silly like that.
Yeah.
That leads me to a couple of questions. Some communities are having more of an active partnership between mental health and or other people who are really more trained to deal with those issues that are not crimes, right? Whether they're poverty or mental illness or whatever. Very often those people are going out in tandem with police, sometimes going out instead of police. What are your thoughts on that?
I think there have been some successful programs, and they're mostly in larger jurisdictions that have the resources and the funding to be able to do it. There are agencies that have mental health clinicians that are out working with the police officers or the deputy sheriffs. And they might be in their own vehicle or they might be riding double with an officer. And I think if we had the resources and the funding and ability to do that, that would be pretty amazing. I think in our jurisdiction, and we are working with our mental health, our county mental health, in solving some of these problems, because we have the needs not only out in the field when we come across somebody who might be suicidal, but we also have needs in our jail, because many people in our jail have mental health issues, substance abuse issues, that some of those go hand in hand. But we do have our county mental health that is working hand in hand with us to try to deal with some of those issues.
And so the other one I wanted to ask was former Crescent City Police Chief Ivan Minsel was very, very vocal and very clear that being poor and being homeless is not a crime, and that everyone has the same level of constitutional rights and protections. If you're committing a crime, that's one thing. But just being poor and homeless doesn't cause you to have any kind of lesser status when it comes to the legal protections in our system than whether you have the biggest house on Pebble Beach Drive. Your thoughts?
No, I agree with that. Our job is our primary job is to protect people from criminal activities.
Not protecting someone from asking money on an island in the...
Right. Now, there are other segments of government that, depending on the government and what their codes say, as far as littering, camping, and there's a great argument there too, because people say, hey, I pay my taxes. Why does this have to look like a garbage dump out in front of the whatever gas station as I drive by? This is our city. We're supposed to keep it clean. So there's a great argument to that. Why do you let these people camp here and set up their tents? Or why do you let them park their old broken down motorhome out in the parking lot? Because there is a pride that people want to beautify their home, their jurisdiction, their city or their county, and I think there's something to be said for that. And so, what is the solution? I guess I don't have a solution for that one, but I think that's something that's one of the tough jobs that government has, is protecting everybody's rights. You try to make everybody happy, but everybody's not going to be happy ever. There's somebody that's going to feel slighted. But you have to work at the big picture. You have to come back, zoom back a little bit, look at the global picture and see what is affecting the greater good, what is going to be best for the people as a whole.
11:19 the time. You're tuned to KFUG Community Radio, and I think we should work toward wrapping up. We've taken up an hour of the sheriff's time, but yes, we do have more questions.
Oh yeah, last question I got here from listener Kim Matz-Yost. Powerful name. How about the volunteer cold case team? What'll be happening with this group?
Ooh.
Which I didn't know we had a
I
volunteer
didn't know
cold
we had
case
that
team.
either.
I didn't know we had that either.
Not part of the sheriff's department.
Well, no, let me tell you, we have that in concept. We started working on putting together a missing persons unit.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this began at the beginning of, well, right around March of 2020.
the best time to plan.
Yeah. Smooth sailing from here on out.
Yes. So it kind of put a damper on bringing in volunteers, and there's some other hurdles that we have to get past to have volunteers working on some confidential cases and things like that. So there's some screening that has to happen. Yeah, that kind of got shelved or put on pause. We do have a retired annuitant that is working on that, who's been integrated with our agency for quite a while.
I'm sorry, retired what?
Retired annuitant. He was a member of our agency, and he retired and then went into a part-time position doing investigations.
Okay, I hadn't heard that word.
I didn't know that was a term for that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different terms. I don't think we even call it that. Some agencies call it that. We call it extra help.
I can deal with that.
There we go.
Yeah. In plain English that even I understand. I had to practice that word, annuitant, to get it right.
Yeah,
But you did it well. I mean,
I think that's the
pretty
term
impressive.
the state of California calls it, and somehow we just kind of picked
Like
that
you're
up.
annuitant. I imagine like a masked police officer. Like this is an elite
The
force.
annuitant.
It's coming to your TV station.
Tonight on
soon.
The Annuitant.
Well, that's all the written questions we have. Do y'all have any?
Well, I guess what I'd like to know, and if we're getting ready to wrap up, is what is it that we haven't asked you,
Yeah.
and what is it that you'd like to communicate to our listeners now that you are our new county sheriff?
Well, I can think of a couple things. We are at a position right now where our staffing is fairly low. We're working hard every day to make sure our shifts are covered with minimum staffing, and we're having discussions because we're in the hiring process right now. We've put out the notice. We're accepting applications for deputy sheriffs. That takes a while. It takes a while to hire a peace officer. There's a background investigation that we have to go through. It's nothing that happens quickly. Plus, you add in the government aspect, and everybody knows nothing happens quickly with government, right? But we are working on ways to streamline some of the background processes. My long-term goal is to start really focusing on hiring hometown people and start developing them through the different channels that we have. We have an Explorer program. I want to kind of work on that, expand that a little bit to where we start developing some people's interest, and maybe they'll come and work in our jail, because you don't have to go through an academy to get hired in the jail. You get on-the-job training, you get sent away to training that's mandatory, but it's more of an entry-level job to be a correctional technician, which controls, the short version is they control the doors in the jail and they do some paperwork things. And then there's a correctional officer who deals hands-on it and has inmate contact. And there's a career path in there. But then we're developing, there is a path already where we can bring people from a correctional officer position and into a deputy recruit position to where we would sponsor them through the academy. So I want to focus on that and start developing people who are going to stay longer term. And this is their home and they want to keep this their home. And I think that it's a rewarding career. It's not for everybody, certainly not for everybody, but if we can start developing that thought when they're younger and bring them in through a career path, I think that's something that will make us a more solid agency.
Wow, and focusing just on homegrown talent, just local folks here staying here. That's great. Wow.
Yeah, and there are other avenues too. There we can look at people who are maybe longer in their career and they want to finish their last 5 years in a location that's scenic and beautiful and the weather is great, and they can come here and do a second part of the end of their career.
But be
and
careful.
maybe be an undersheriff.
They might be me too.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope.
All right,
you never know
careful.
what's going to land in your lap.
The next thing you know, you're the undersheriff, and then all of a sudden you're the sheriff.
People are asking you if you're going to run again, right? Yeah, I know. That's you're going to run.
And then who knows? After a couple of terms, board of supervisors.
Right, that's it. Sky's the limit.
Pump the brakes a little there.
Yeah. Sheriff Randy Waltz, thank you very much for coming in today. It was good to get to know you and just find out who you are and what you have in mind for law enforcement and for the sheriff's office here in Delnor. It was great to meet you.
Thank you for having me. It's been good.
Look
Anything
forward
else?
to having you on again at some point.
Great.
All right. You
That's
survived.
it. Yeah, that's it.
We did it.
Flash. The sun did not rise this morning. Large cracks have been seen in the earth and rocks are reported falling from the skies. More details in 30 minutes on KFUG.